Boom, boom. Alrighty. What's up? You just... Good, same. East Coast type thing. That's still makeup. It's still there. It's still there. All right. Well, chat. What in the World podcast community? Welcome back to another episode on this fine Sunday evening. Happy 4th of July weekend, first of all. So, hope everybody's out there celebrating responsibly and safely. And make sure that your dogs are taken care of, because it's not a fun weekend for them or anybody with any type of PTSD from anything. So, just gonna put that little PSA out there. But with us tonight, yeah, I know, dude. It's a struggle for some people. It's a struggle for some people out there, man. Yeah, tonight we have Amanda Johnson with us. I am actually not going to steal any of the intro thunder from her for her story, so I'm gonna let her do that if she wants. Alex, if you want to say a few words, you can go ahead, but I'm gonna let her. I'm gonna let her.
Any jokes made on this podcast, I can already tell just in our brief conversation that Amanda has a really good sense of humor. But this is not an easy topic to talk about. It's a really horrific story. And any jokes that are made on my part is not towards the situation. It's kind of like last week, speaking with that gentleman that lost his wife. You know, we were laughing and joking, and I felt like I kept having to say, like, I'm not trying to say that your wife's death was a great thing, but, you know, great things have come from it, if you will. So it's a really hard story to talk about, but at the same time, I think it's an important one to talk about. And you're writing a book about your experience, is that correct?
I am. I actually, just, if you can track with me, I just submitted the edit to the final edit for the last edit of my book to the publisher.
So many edits. Okay.
So many edits.
Yeah.
But yes, it is projected to be published in the fall. I don't have a hard release date yet, but
yeah. And we actually have a link down below in the description of this live video for y'all to go check out and pre-order that book if you so desire at the end of this. So it is down there ready to go. But yeah,
Awesome.
first of all, thank you so much for coming on and taking the time out of your Sunday to come and talk with us and share your story. I think it's an important topic to talk about for sure. And I think one that there's a lot of controversy around it, I think sometimes, but there's also it's not talked about
Hmm.
enough. And a lot of the times, a lot of the stories get just kind of swept under the rug, which is not okay. Um, so we
I
appreciate it.
agree. And so, with that, I just want to thank you, gentlemen, for allowing me to come on and talk about it because it is a topic that so many people shy away from for various different reasons. And
Hmm.
so, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be
Of
able
course.
to speak about it.
Of course. So, guys, this is going to be your last trigger warning. I'm going to use that phrase. This is going to be your last
Yeah.
trigger warning before we jump into it. This tonight's episode is going to deal with SA, and if you're not familiar with the shorthand for SA, is it's sexual assault. And that is, kind of where Amanda's story is and what her book is about. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to you, Amanda, and we'll go from there. And Alex and I will probably just jump in here and there as we have questions or other things that, we want to
Okay.
input in. So the floor is yours, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And I guess before I'll just start off with saying thank you with the comment about your jokes that it's very fitting because I do talk about how learning to laugh again was really really important and reclaiming my life after surviving rape. And so, I mean, the audience is like, well, what happened? So, when I was 22 years old, I was in my fourth year at the University of Nevada, Reno, and I had finished a midterm at 10 p.m. And I left with a group of people, and because it had been ingrained in me growing up that there is safety in numbers. And as we approached the parking garage, I was the only one that had parked on the ground floor. And so I surveyed the area and I didn't see anything between myself and the vehicle. And so I wished the group a good week, said I'll see you guys next time. And I started heading to my vehicle. And as I was walking, making my way, it became abundantly clear to me that what I had not seen was a man that was hunched behind the wheel well of a sedan and a truck.
Mm.
And he, I won't get into the details, but he grabbed me from behind and forced me to the ground and raped me at gunpoint for several minutes. And then he left me there. He went on to kidnap and rape his second victim, and he raped and murdered his last known victim. Most people will ask me, well, what did you do next? What did you do? And I always thought I knew what I would do if I ever found myself in this situation. But you can never really prepare for the amount of shock that will rush over you when you find yourself in a life-threatening situation like that. And so I remember driving to the closest safe place for me, which was my sorority house. I was not living in the house at the time, but it was my fourth year as a member. And from across the interstate, I could see the hospital, and I considered going and reporting. But I didn't want my body to be a crime scene because I knew enough knowing that that's what we're asking survivors to subject themselves to in that moment. And it is an extremely personal choice. And I had a plan of survival, and my plan of survival was this didn't happen, and I'm gonna wash it away. I'm gonna just make it so that, and then move on. And so I went to the house, I took a shower, I drove home to where I actually lived and took another shower. And then the next morning when I woke up, I truly believed that I had had the worst nightmare of my life. And I would later learn that that's a very common response to dissociate and to have dissociative amnesia.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't remember until about 2 weeks after, and then at that point I knew that it was far too late to make a report. And so you guys can like jump in and ask questions if you have them. I'm just kind of giving like a brief like timeline. And so I ended up letting my roommate know what had happened because I was so inconsolable and my mood had shifted so much. And after I remembered, I let her know what was going on, and she encouraged me to go and make a report. And I said, like, I'm gonna look like a crazy person looking for attention. I'm not doing that. Just leave it alone. And so then reports came out of the second victim, but it was really when the third one went missing that she really wanted me to make a report because she thought it was the same person. And when you're faced with stuff like that and it's your own self, there's so much denial that's so much easier to embrace than actually accepting the reality of and the gravity of this situation. But my roommate called the detectives and they called me, and once they approached me, it was like it was no longer about me. And so what I was really hoping that I could just go in, tell my story, and they'd let me go. But then they let me know that they were pretty certain it was the same individual. And I helped them compose a sketch because I had seen half of his face.
That was going to be one of my questions.
And that sketch was pretty instrumental, was actually the strongest piece of evidence that for my particular case, when it went to trial, because they did eventually end up catching him, trying and convicting him. And he's currently now sitting on death row in Nevada for the murder of his last victim. And then he's serving 4 consecutive life sentences.
Good.
Yeah, good for him. Oh, yeah. Not good for him. Like, good that he's fucking there.
Correct.
Yeah. He's where he deserves to be.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, he worked hard to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jesus.
So I have written a book. It's called Beyond Survival: Reclaiming My Life After I Survived Rape, because to be honest, the word survivor just like is like sandpaper to me, because I survived. I was left alive, but I wasn't really living my life. I was going through the motions. And at the time of my rape, I was dating a man who is now my husband. And we have 3 beautiful girls and such. But so I was doing all these steps. I was going through the motions of surviving, but I wasn't actually living my life, because the night that I was raped, my soul was murdered. Who I was becoming changed forever. And there's no me going back to who I was the night I went into that parking garage.
No, there's not. But I mean, kudos to your like now husband for the man that he is and by sticking by you the entire time. That's amazing and that's awesome. So like huge respect for him in my book for sure. Like that's awesome. I'm glad that there was at least some like happy, like, or so I don't know. I don't want to call it like a happy ending or like a silver lining, out of all of that, but that he stayed and maintained like a solid presence in your life.
Yeah, I think that's like, it's so interesting. It's such a common response that you have, and a lot of people say it, and it makes my husband so uncomfortable, because he's like, well, why wouldn't I? It wasn't your fault. It didn't like damage you. It didn't. And I think that response in him helped me fight the lies so much that come up with a lot of survivors from
Mhm.
rape. I know I just said that like grains me like sandpaper, but that's
Yeah.
what everybody
That's
says.
what they've dubbed
That's
it. Yeah.
the coined phrase.
Yeah, the coined phrase, yeah.
And it's just this like like it's so
Mhm.
sad because people say like, oh, be a survivor, go out there and rise above, but then at the same time people act like it was my fault by saying that they're shocked that, like, unintentionally, like saying that they're shocked that my husband stayed with me.
Mhm. I think that part
That
of that is the fact that I think maybe the way society is now, that
Mhm.
not enough people have um the courage to, you know, stick by somebody through that. They don't have, I don't know if courage is
Yeah,
the right word. They just they don't
I'm
have.
not being
Yeah,
critical
I'm trying to like I'm
of
trying
what
to find the
you
right thing.
said.
Yeah.
I think it's, I mean, bad is bad, right? Like,
Right.
life is messy.
Mhm.
Everybody's life is messy. We all have a story, and people can be sitting there and hearing what I've been through and think, "Oh man, there's no way." But bad is bad. We've all been through stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could use a whole lot of expletives, but I won't.
Yeah.
And it's just how we. So in my book, I talk about how, like, the steps that I've had to find and the key components, the pillars that I've had to find to be able to live a full life, to not just
Mhm.
survive, to not just breathe and take up space, but to actually see color again and to enjoy the moments of life that are meant to be enjoyed to the fullest extent that I can and that
Mhm.
I'm able. And it's not perfect. And I'm by no means an expert because all I have to offer is my story.
Mhm.
Um, but that's life. That's the journey that we're all on
Mm.
is that. But I do in my book talk a lot about too, just some of the reactions I received and how it really hindered my ability to heal fully for a long time.
Mm.
Um, and one of them was that there was a group of ladies at my church that didn't, as I started like opening up during the trial process and stuff, they didn't believe me,
Mm.
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
such a
Which
common response.
Yeah, which is actually that's like it's interesting that you like have you're talking about that and tied it in, because later on in July, everything going well, I have a guest, a girl that I went to college with, who
Hmm.
suffered domestic abuse, and she was married to a pastor, and he, uh, committed domestic abuse against her all the time, and the same kind of response from like the lady, like those ladies that you were talking about, she had the same kind of response from some people in the church as well. Like, well, it's you're just the man's wife. You're supposed to be submissive and do whatever he tells you, and then like they tried to just normalize it, and she was like, "This isn't normal. What do you mean?"
Hmm.
So it's interesting that there's that correlation um,
Yeah.
with that, and I think it's just uncomfortable. Well, it's uncomfortable for everybody, but that it's just super uncomfortable, I think, for people in the church to try and wrap their head around this, like in either situation, and think outside of their what they've been told.
Yeah.
It's such a I have so many things I want to say. I'm glad that you're writing your book. I'm really glad that you're writing that book as an older brother of two sisters, as I call my stepdaughter, my bonus daughter, as a father of not biologically mine, but a daughter. I don't know how I would react to that situation other than wanting to find that person and do horrible unspoken things to them.
Commit great
Um,
crimes.
yeah, and
Mhm.
it's one of those things. No one is going. There's no playbook on. Okay, you've been a victim of sexual assault. Here's what you do next, right?
Mhm.
And how people perceive this topic that is difficult but important to talk about is you see the same story play out very frequently, in the sense that people don't believe the accuser, and that unfortunately there have been some women, especially to high profile individuals, make these accusations that haven't come out to be true, and then that's where everybody wants to stand on the hill and say, see, this is why we just can't believe everybody. Well, A, yes, but B, no. We there has to be a more open discussion and the ability to look at this particular situation and see that there are things that happen very commonly after such a horrific event occurs, and we can do things to stop that. And I think your book will be instrumental in that, in giving maybe someone who has suffered this tragic event, not a playbook, but okay, here's what I went through, and here's how you can change what happens next if this should happen to you.
Yeah.
I think it's also
2 things.
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh, go
I
ahead.
mean, I was gonna say, I think it's also super important with your book coming out and everything to help change the narrative from survivor to literally anything else other than just survivor.
So I think it's you go from victim to survivor, survivor to victor.
Yeah.
Where you're out on top, where we can conquer that mountain, and be above.
Right, because they always just stop at survivor. They're like, and at that connotation at that point is, well, at least you made it out and you're breathing. Like, well, there's more to life. There's more to life than just being a lump on a log and breathing. Like.
Yeah. Yeah, and so like 2 things that were said earlier about the disbelief. I've done a lot of research, and it's a very small number of sexual assaults that are reported that are actually falsified. It's less than 5%. And then on the flip side, so many sexual assaults are not reported. What we do know about what is reported is that 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 women are going to experience sexual assault before they're out of college. That's what's reported.
Yikes.
That is what's reported. And then with that, less than 10% of rapists will spend any time in jail. Will even be, such a low number are even prosecuted, and then an even lower number are given any prison time at all. And what is an anomaly about my particular case is that some will say that it's because he had more than one victim. That's not true. The majority of convicted rapists will admit that they have on average 8 victims, but they're serving time for 1. And I can send you guys like the notes too, if you guys want these, so that I'm not just like spewing.
No, that's send them over if you want, for sure. It's definitely stuff that we can use even after this podcast is done to for anything in it.
Where was I? Okay, so that's not what's an anomaly in my case. What's odd is that I didn't know my attacker, because 90% of victims do know their attacker in some form or capacity. And so that makes my story kind of seem, it's like, I feel like it could be written for like daytime only,
SVU.
lifetime TV. Yeah. And that my attacker, he's never going to walk the streets again.
Yeah.
I never have to worry about my rapist walking the streets again, because he's serving 4 consecutive life sentences and the death penalty. So even if he comes up for parole for his 1 life sentence, then he's going to have to start serving another one.
Yeah.
And that is not the case for any other person I know who's been raped and whose attacker is serving time. They have to go to parole hearings. They have to go to probation hearings. They have to go it's constantly revisited, and it's constantly having to retell how and why this person should not be allowed back on the streets. And it shouldn't be that way.
Why do you think that is, that the sentence is so light for most of these offenders? I mean, I know you're not a lawyer, but you've done a lot of research on this, and what would be your best educated guess as to why that is? Sorry, not to put you on the spot.
No. I can give you a little bit of a history sentence. So I think it was 1974, 78. I don't remember the exact year. Georgia v. Cocker was passed in the Supreme Court, which overturned the death penalty for rape. And they said, the Supreme Court noted, because it was a violation of the Eighth Amendment and fell under cruel and unusual punishment because the rapist, quote, didn't take a life.
Well,
and so I really think that a lot of it has to do with conversations like this one that we're having aren't being had. Yeah. And people aren't vocalizing and acknowledging the depth of what rape does to an individual. Not just me, but my entire family. My husband is the unspoken collateral damage. Yes, he's amazing. He's an amazing man because he married a woman who he knew was forever changed from the woman he fell in love with.
Exactly.
You know, my parents walked through that entire process with me. As a parent, I can't fathom having to endure that with my child, my parents, my friends. I mean, I think there's this misconception that rape is an event that happens and then ends, but the issues remain really real and present throughout the rest of our lives. And it affects every area of what we do because that's what trauma does.
Yeah.
But this particular crime is on such a different level because of the boundaries that are violated within sex. Sex is a beautiful thing when within the right context, when there is consent present, when there is, you know, both parties are mutually engaged.
I was going to say mutually engaged, you know.
But when that's taken away, that is like the most vulnerable position that you can willingly put yourself in. And then when that's taken away and that's forced upon you, it's not sex. It is violence, and it is control, and it is dehumanizing.
Yes.
And like you said, it's not something that you just bounce back from. Your brain is obviously telling you, okay, this is how we're going to cope with this. We're going to pretend like it never happened immediately afterwards. But no one knows how they would respond in that situation until it would happen. And as a man, let's say the shoe was on the other foot in the rare case that would ever happen. I still, as a male, I feel like I would respond differently because different sex. That's just different gender. No one can tell someone how they should or how they're going to. Once again, there's no playbook for this. And how long did it take you to feel, A, to recognize that you were just kind of going through the motions, and B, if it's happened, to feel like you do have your life back in some sense, that you're actually living?
So, just real quick, when you're talking about like the rare occasion of men, it actually happens a lot more than what people would
more often than what you would think.
surmise. But there's so much more stigma attached to men that it's even more underreported, and it's even more, when I go and speak, there's times when men will come up to me and share with me when they were younger men, like when they were little, when they were boys. And I find that that's a whole lot more common, unfortunately, than what we
Yeah.
would like to believe. And so I just don't want to push that under the rug and not address that, even though I'm speaking as like a from the standpoint of a woman.
Well,
But to answer,
and that might be a part of my brain coming into play too, because a situation
yeah.
like that kind of happened to me in college that involved
Mm.
alcohol being. I was drinking that night. I don't want to make it seem like I was, like drugged, but at the same time, a lot of alcohol was forced down my throat, so I could be in a very vulnerable situation to have sexual practices with a certain individual that I'd never really had any interest in. But that individual was really interested in getting me to the point where I wasn't going to remember anything that night. So, and she succeeded. So, anyway, not comparing me to you whatsoever, but, the stigma is a lot different. I'll just put it that way.
It is a lot different because people would say to you like, "Oh, don't act like you didn't want it anyway," or and it just minimizes the evil, like the level of evil. Like that's not, because when you're at that point, when that person is at that point of taking something so precious from someone, it's not about sex anymore. It's about control, and it's about violence, and it's about dehumanizing them. And so I'm really sorry that happened, and I'm really sorry that you've felt like that. It's just that you've like faced that stigma, and I want to thank you for being vulnerable and honest about what your experience has been, because that's not easy
Well, no,
either.
and again, it's an important but hard topic to talk about, but at the
Mhm.
same time, just because it's hard and might be a little uncomfortable, I would say that that's something that we should have more conversation around because of those two things. If it's
Yeah,
hard and
absolutely.
uncomfortable, we should probably be discussing it so that we're not giving rape victims, or I'm sorry, rapists, a 5-year sentence and sending them back out on the street. I mean,
Yeah, so that they can do it again.
Exactly.
yeah.
And from from the military side of things, so I don't know. I mean, I'm in the Air Force and I was in the Marines before, and they do a very piss poor job of having these conversations and telling people basically not to do it. The standard go to that has been around for a long time, and I'm sure you may have seen this, is that tea video, the little stick figure that's like, don't force tea on somebody, and it's basically equating sex to tea and basically like talking about consent and all that stuff. And nobody takes it seriously because at the root of it, it's kind of a comical video because they've equated sex to tea and trying to like basically teach fucking like how not to rape 101 to a bunch of military guys. It's not an effective strategy, and then they all look around confused as to why it still happens. So these type of conversations, I think, are the better educators to people of, this is what this does to people, and basically don't be that person. Like there's I don't know. I have a hard time fathoming in my brain why someone would want to do that. It's hard for me to draw the connection. Just I guess of that like unspeakable evil that you would just commit on someone who has no choice in the matter.
And
You're breaking up a little bit, Amanda. Sorry. There it goes.
There you go.
It's fine.
So that just like in a society that is so over sexualized, we need to be having these conversations about what healthy sex is. And frankly, if we're having these conversations with 18-year-old men as they're joining in the military, it's too late.
Yeah.
These conversations need to be happening a lot sooner with body autonomy. Of like, my girls are not forced to hug anybody that they don't want to. And likewise, if someone's like, "Oh, give me a hug," I'll step in and say, "You know what? They said no. And so that's their answer. You need to accept it. Like
Yeah.
you don't need to be polite. You don't need to be nice. If it's not comfortable to you, then don't.
Yeah, because
And
looking back now, it's like that happened a lot growing up. Like I know
yeah,
I'm almost 30. Alex is just over 30. I'm not gonna be rude and ask how old you are. Um, but like that was the norm growing up through the
mhm,
90s and early 2000s because you had the baby boomers who were your grandparents or whatever that were like, no,
yeah.
go up and hug that person and be nice. And it's like, I don't know this dude from Adam. Like, why?
But they don't to do that. And I think that those conversations and allowing kids to have the power to say no and honoring that is so so important. And even like when my girls are with their friends and they want to give their friend a hug, but their friend is clearly
Not about
not
it.
comfortable with it, I'm like, hey, did you ask if you could give a hug? Like, did you, like if you, and maybe it sounds so, people would say like, oh, well, in the moment you don't want to ask. Well, if you're unsure, you better be asking,
Yeah.
because if your partner's frozen, if the other participant is frozen, they're not into it. You need to like pause and ask like, hey, are you okay with this? And if they say no, then be man enough or woman enough to say, okay, then let's go do something else. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I might need to go for a run to get this energy out of me, or I might need to go do something else that's more of like a healthy outlet than
Mm-hmm.
what, but let's, like, these conversations though need to be had, and they need to be had often. As soon as we start talking about sex with our kids is when these conversations
Yeah, I
need
think
to be
you're
had as well.
you're 100% right on that. I do want to kind of circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the amount of reporting not happening and how that ties
Mhm.
into the feeling like you had where you don't want your body to be a crime scene.
Mhm.
That's like I think it's just that's a big factor into why a lot of those don't get reported, which it's understandable at time because like you just went through a traumatic experience and now you have to go try and report this and literally fight the urge to not try and cleanse yourself from that, and now you
Mhm.
have who knows how many other people trying to like poke and prod at you and like even more uncomfortableness in order to try and get the DNA and everything that they need to build a case. And yeah, it's unimaginably tough. So I don't know. I don't know if there's much we can do at that spot to try and help
Well,
like
so
reporting numbers come up.
I think it's education of like knowing that there are services out there, because there's a lot of response units, and I didn't
Hmm.
know this, and there needs to be more, frankly, all over the world, but
Yeah.
really, really all over the world. But if we could start with our country, that would be great. Where you can go to a particular place, like, and law enforcement should be aware of what they are. They're called different things all over, like a safe house, a butterfly house, all kinds of things,
Hmm.
where it is separate from the hospital and not at a police station. They're typically nonprofits,
Mm.
and they will kind of it's just a much gentler
Yeah.
environment. There's a nurse that's been trained in that. They'll have an advocate with them if they want to. Law enforcement will come in after the exam is
Hmm.
complete and take a report. But they have what most people don't maybe always realize is that your clothes are taken as evidence. And
Hmm.
so if you go to a hospital, sometimes the hospital is scrambling if they don't have those services in place to find clothes for that individual, or that individual has to call a loved
Someone.
one to bring clothes down for them to wear
Mm.
home. And so these places will have like sweats, like comfy clothes,
Hmm.
and showers for after the exam for the person to be able to take a shower and things like that, just because there's no way getting around of how incredibly invasive the exam
Yeah.
is. But if you can make it more
Humane, essentially.
humanizing
Yeah.
and giving the person just every step of the way. I'm going to do this now. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
They say yes, you do it. They say no, you stop. They stop. They don't force them, and I think that um, that's incredibly. I don't. I'm like losing the word, but empowering for the victim after
Yeah.
going through something so inhumane.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it, seeing more of those over throughout the country that are funded would be nice.
Yeah, I agree with you there for sure. It's more empowering, and I would say it's also more compassionate than going to somewhere else where
Mm-hmm.
they're just going to treat it as essentially a crime scene and get in and do what they have to do. It could definitely will help the victim's mentality leaps and bounds in the long run. Um, I know I do just like crapped all over the military for their education, and it is crap. But one thing that I guess they do decently well is push out the services for after if it happens. The flip side of that coin is we're pushing that more heavy than we are trying to prevent, which
Yeah.
is sad in and of itself. But at least there's something on the unfortunate back end that is helpful to people. Now I thankfully haven't known anyone that's had to go through it, so I don't know how compassionate and humane it is on the flip side. I hope that they do end up taking victims to places like you mentioned that are a little bit more compassionate rather than just rolling them down into either the clinic on base or OSI, because that's basically like the cops, the investigative
Mm-hmm.
branch. So if you, I could do my own research too, but if you happen to have any research or any like links or anything, resources, that's what I was looking for the places like that. I know that I can at least try and route that up somewhere along my chain that'll hopefully help somebody along the way, and see if we can get something like that implemented.
I mean, I at least know in the Florida area because that's where I'm currently located.
And that's fair.
And I know of some in Virginia and in Nevada because
Okay.
those are now all the. Now you know where I have lived.
There you go.
Okay. That's fair. I'm
But
sure
to
that
go,
New Jersey has something along the same lines. So I'll do my own digging.
oh, I would hope so. Yeah.
Yeah.
But to circle like way
Back.
earlier, where you asked about how long, or I was
Yeah.
asked about how long had it taken before I realized I was just going through the motions. And it was about 2.5 years. It was about the time of the trial. So the person that had attacked me was captured 13 months after my rape, and then the trial wasn't for another essentially 18 months. And so like 2 years in, 2.5 years, I was just really fed up with being a ball on the couch because I would just spend a lot of my free time that wasn't taken up in my classes because due to this, I had to take some victory laps around to get my bachelor's.
Mm-hmm.
The following semester, I failed several of my classes, understandably so. My head just wasn't in the right space. And I was 24 years old at the time, about to turn 25, and presumably had a whole lot of life left to live. And I knew that it couldn't consist of just being on the couch, staring aimlessly at whatever stupid reality TV was on what was playing.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted more. I wanted to return back to the land of the living, but I didn't know how. It just seemed so unattainable for me. And I mentioned that I go to church, and so my faith has played a huge role in that. And the first thing that I was led to do through my relationship with Jesus was to forgive the man who raped me, which is super controversial, super, like, I don't make a lot of friends saying that.
Yeah.
Because I think people confuse forgiveness as being like indulgence and forbearance as saying like, oh, it's okay, like what we would do to our friends, like, oh, she hurt your feelings, we'll say you're sorry,
Yeah.
okay, now go run off and play.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that. It was it freed me, forgiving him, and I was able during my impact statement, during the sentencing, to at the end, I let him have it. I let him know everything that this had caused in my life up to that point. I said, but even with all that, I forgive you because of who Jesus is in my life. And it wasn't for him, it was for me. It was for me to be able to cut that tie and say, you no longer get to have this control over my life. You no longer get to take up the space in my head and in my heart that you don't deserve to have anyways, because there's nothing that he can do to undo what he did to me.
Right.
But in my faith, Jesus and his cross, what he did, what he accomplished is big enough to absorb that. And so I can take that and pass that on to the Lord for his judgment, for him to contend with, and to just be free from that. And it's not that easy. It is a choice. Forgiveness is an act of the will, and the will can function regardless of the temperature of the heart. And so that was the very, very first step for me of reclaiming my life, was to walk in forgiveness. Take it, leave it, but that's what gave it to me. And the title of my book is Reclaiming. The publisher really wanted me to say the title in my book is Reclaiming My Life, and the publisher really wanted me to say how I reclaimed. And I said, because this is a lifelong journey.
Yeah.
This is continual. This is forever for me until I am face to face with Jesus in heaven. And so there have been seasons in my life where I have been able to walk very victorious and really enjoy that fullness that is out there for all of us to claim and to enjoy. And then there has been seasons that have caused me to have to revisit that trauma as another layer of healing has been pulled back, and I'm just taken deeper into a bigger understanding of, or a bigger acceptance, I guess, of what was taken, what was lost, and reconciling that. And I think we need to normalize that too, that just because someone's doing well at a certain point in their life doesn't mean that the trauma is not going to have to be revisited and that a deeper level of healing is going to have to be accomplished.
Yeah, trauma's like a bad onion. There's always more layers somewhere down the way that eventually get peeled back, or you're going to have to deal with the bad spot that's underneath.
It's like you said, he can't go back and undo it. I always think of situations like that, like trying to put toothpaste back in the tube of toothpaste. That's not how it works. It's not going to happen like that. And I feel like that's kind of how our court system looks at it too. It's always shocked me, especially for convicted rapists, and I feel like it's very similar for people who have committed child sex offenders is the word that I'm looking for. I've always been shocked at the light sentences, and it feels to me like it's viewed in the sense of, okay, well, at least that person still has their life. Well, not really. That person that walked into that garage that night, that Amanda doesn't live here anymore. She's not here anymore.
Right.
And a big part of your moving forward, not to speak for you, is recognizing that unfortunately that Amanda died that night. She's no longer with us. And now the next Amanda can be beautiful and have 3 amazing children and a wonderful husband. And that's not to say that it has to be a horrible life, but at the same time, you don't get that back. That's not that level of trauma isn't something you just move on from and say, oh, well, like you said, sorry, tell Amanda you're sorry.
Mhm.
Like that's not how it works,
Right.
That forgiveness process, that's very intriguing to me. And I because I've had conversations with people before surrounding forgiveness, and atheists, Christians, you name it, about what that looks like. What, and maybe this is too vague of a question, what did that look like for you in the sense of forgiving him? I mean, do you forgive for the action? Do you forgive for being a human and making a mistake? Or I guess and if this is too deep of a question, feel free to say, Alex, I don't really want to get into this. But it's intriguing to me, and it maybe intriguing is not even the right word, but it's very, I don't know that I could find it within myself. If that happened to my daughter, I don't know that I could ever find it within myself to forgive the man that did that to her. I know I should, especially faith-based, and holding on to it's not going to do me any good, but I just don't know that I could ever really bring myself to that level to forgive that individual.
Shameless plug. This is 2 full chapters in my book.
Perfect.
Where I talk about the process and it is so unnatural, and it really, really has to do with everything about who Jesus is in my life, and how I've given my life to him. And so, do I forgive the action? I think I had to understand that, or I had to, how do I say this? It took, it's like happened in stages, right? Like it's gone like deeper as I've gotten older and as I've walked through this journey. But recognizing for me that God didn't will this to happen, but we're given free will. And so we suffer the consequences of that. And so realizing for me that the night my soul was being murdered, God the Father wept over me like he wept over his son when he was on the cross. And Jesus died for my benefit. He died for my sins, for my benefit, to pay for that atonement. And so I've accepted that, and he is the Lord and Savior of my life. And so me walking out of unforgiveness was me denying who I was in him, and I was foregoing my identity in the Lord when I was walking in unforgiveness. And I needed to forgive for myself because my unforgiveness was affecting every relationship I had. I was bitter. I was angry. I was self-righteous. Nothing good, because unforgiveness will breed roots of bitterness that'll crack the very foundation of who we are. And so I don't forgive the act. I guess I accept it for what it is and for what it's taught me. But it's acknowledging that I don't know what that man has been through to bring him to that point, but I can pretty well imagine that when he was a little boy, he didn't imagine that he would end up in court for having raped 3 women and murdering his last. And you asked, like, oh, do I forgive him? I'm not going to sit down and have dinner with the guy ever.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. There's people in my camp
that have done it,
and they are amazing to me. Like, I'm in awe of the amount of strength that takes to do. But it's just a release of saying, like, this is not my burden to carry anymore, and I'm gonna lay it down, symbolically, metaphorically. Like, I'm gonna lay this down at the foot of the cross and just let it go and not carry this burden anymore. That's not for me to carry. It wasn't doing any good for me. And so it's I'm probably not doing the best explaining it.
No,
you're doing fine, actually.
It's just allowing and trusting the Lord, trusting Jesus to absorb that, because he's really the only one that can bring healing in that aspect. And he's the only one that could really, like, just trusting that the cross is big enough to absorb my sin, but it's also big enough to absorb the sin that's done against me.
Yeah. It sounds like faith plays a huge instrumental role in it, and that's one of the beautiful things about having a faith in religion, especially a faith in Jesus, that that he can carry that for you, and that's why he was here and came and died for our sins, so, and for the sins of others. No matter how big or how bad. I mean, I feel like that guy's gonna have a pretty tough time when he gets up to those gates. I don't think that's gonna be a great fun time for him. But again, that's not for us to decide. That's we're not the judge and jury. And it's
I have a question, Amanda, along the faith aspect, since we're on it, because I did look on the website and read through kind of the synopsis and everything, and it did say that you question your faith in God for a while, and I'm not trying to compare apples to apples here. This is probably more like apples to peanuts, but like when I went through my divorce, I sat down and literally cursed God to his face, and like, so I don't know if you went through like the similar like type of thing, but like what um what was the process of I guess to eventually getting back from that point to back to where you are now, where you're wholly trusting and everything again.
Yeah. So my husband and I met with a pastor at our church after the preliminary trial. It was my poor husband. Like shortly after we got married, 7 months into our marriage, um, James Bila was captured, and then shortly after that, we had the preliminary trial, and the stress of that caused me to suffer one of our miscarriages, and so it was like enough is enough. Like I don't even know that God is real, and if He is, like, what is this even for? Like this is trash. This is garbage. Couple other expletives, and so we sat down with a pastor, and a pastor was very compassionate and kind, and just said, like, your people have been questioning and wrestling with their faith from the beginning of time, like all throughout the Bible. There's evidence of that, and so you just have to make the choice, Amanda. You have to decide. I can't make it for you. Are you willing to wrestle with God through this onto the other side? Are you willing to look at all the evidence that you have in your life leading up to this point and say, yeah, I see your intervention. I see you, like, just where he had shown up into that point, and say, okay, I cannot deny who you are up to this point. So I'm going to wrestle with you to the other side, like Jacob did before God changed his name to Israel. Or are you just gonna throw in the towel and say, you know what, enough is enough, and walk away? And he kind of left that meeting with that question, and we were gonna meet up a few weeks later. And at that moment, I honestly didn't have an answer for him, and I didn't want to wrestle with God, but I had nowhere else to go. Like, where else am I gonna go?
Yeah.
I mean, people will say to me, like, oh, your faith is so strong. Like, but what other option do I have, really? And so it just, I talk a lot about that in my book too, just what that wrestling looked like. There's journal entries and stuff, and it wasn't pretty. It was messy. But it's what needed to happen, and God's big enough to take it. And I can say honestly, like, I did come out on the other side with a bigger understanding of what Jesus endured on the cross for my benefit. And he takes these trials, so to speak, and he is the master redeemer. He promises to trade beauty for ashes, and he promises that he'll use all things for for our good, for the good of those who love him. And we don't always know what that good is, and that good doesn't always make sense to us. But he's after our eternal good. He's after our souls. And so I had to trust that.
Mm-hmm.
And there are still seasons where I am still thoroughly ticked that this is what he decided I needed, or not what he decided I needed to walk through. But I just don't understand why it had to play out the way that it did. And again, he's big enough to take that.
I think it falls under a similar category. I've always said when I get to heaven, my first question is going to be, what's 4-year-old cancer about? Why do 4-year-olds get cancer and die? That's not fair, man. Why? Why do we need that? And the residual answer, or at least humanly answered, that I always think of is, by the time you get there, brother, that's gonna be like back burner stuff. Like you don't need what comes next is so unfathomable that that's not even gonna be a speck on your radar post afterlife, you know. And unfortunately, yes, and I think the goodwill thing, or free will, excuse me, comes huge into play. You know, if we were all designed to be robot Christ followers, well, then there's no aspect of faith. And without the aspect of faith, what are we doing here anyway? You know, if we're just commanded to follow someone. And unfortunately, there is evil in the world. Now, is that what you tell a rape victim or a mother who just lost their 4-year-old child? Well, sorry, God gave us free will, so there's evil. That's just tough luck. You just drew the short straw. No, of course not. You know, there's compassion and things that go into it to help get.
And you lament with them, and you pray with them.
Exactly. You pray with them. You hug them consensually. You know.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, bad joke. I told you. But no, in all reality, you know, that's what we're here to do, and it doesn't matter if I'm going through a tough season. Your trauma different from my trauma, different from Ben's trauma. We all just need to be here to help each other and pull in the same direction. And by the time we get to the other side, it's all peanuts, you know. We just got to get there and get there the best way we can.
Yeah, on his timeline, not ours.
Yeah,
exactly. Yep. That's really beautiful though. Like I said, I don't know how I would react if that happened to a female in my life.
Exactly
or
how I would
happened
react,
to me.
and I'd be in jail for the rest of my life.
Well, I've told my wife many a times, if anybody ever hurts Reagan, my door to the office in the basement is going to become locked and barred up, and I'm going to say, don't go in there. And when I play really loud music at night, it's just the screams coming from the stereo. So that's it. That's just don't come in my office. Don't ask questions about who's in my office.
Yeah, I will be either in jail for the rest of my life, or I will become a ghost and no one's ever going to find me again. Like, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I get that on like a real level. I honestly don't know how my dad and my mom, well, really how my whole family sat in the courtroom so close to him. But I mean, my dad has joked it's our dark humor, and I don't take it lightly, because I do know that he is someone's brother, he is someone's son. But he's been sitting on death row all this time now. My dad's like, I don't know what's taking so long. I mean, I've got ammo that I can supply. We can go back to the firing squad. It's all right. Like, I'll ease the burden from the government.
I'll take it. Well, due to inflation, it's probably about a $250 round now over a $100,000 lethal injection. So you're saving the government money at this rate. But yeah, I get the dark humor thing though, because that's how I cope with a lot of things. It's dark humor, and it's bred from trauma. It's bred from being in the military. It's just how things happen. But
yeah.
Well, and I think a sense of humor is critical. I mean, and again, everybody copes differently, but I think you have to, at least in my brain, have to look at these horrible traumatic events and be able to not laugh about it again, but be able to look at it in a way that says, okay, this happened. What am I going to do? Sit here and wallow Am I just going to sit and cry the rest of my life? No, I'm going to get off my butt and put my pants on and go to work and try to make this situation the best possible way that I can. And finding humor in a really dark situation. I mean, I think especially you being a follower of Jesus had a good sense of humor. And anybody that, one of my favorite stories about God's sense of humor, sorry, I'm totally changing the subject. There's a notoriously bad hitter
Got about
in the
30
MLB.
seconds of line, dude, before I start reeling you back in. So hurry up.
No, there's a notoriously bad hitter in the MLB. And he said, they'll probably put a man on the moon before I hit my first home run. And 30 seconds after Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, he hit his first and only ever career home run. You can't tell me that God doesn't have a sense of humor. And B, you can't tell me God doesn't love baseball. So sorry. But that's my classic, like, come on, man. What are the odds? You know, what are the odds?
Yeah. Like saying it outright, we have hit on like all 4 of the pillars that I talk about in my book. And the first one is my backbone. Sorry, my throat. But that is my relationship with the Lord. That is like, it holds you up, your backbone and your body serves up, but it's integral, right? And so that is where my identity stems from. My backbone, my relationship with the Lord. Second is my rib cage. That's my community. The rib cage it's connected to your backbone, and it's charged with protecting all your vital organs and to absorb a blow when it comes. And that is your close friends that need to be selected with wisdom, as I learned. And the third is your funny bone. I had to learn how to laugh again, and I had to learn to just, when my kids do something where I'm like, what were you thinking? Oh, that's right. You don't have your full brain. You weren't thinking. So, like, that's just, taking those moments for what they are and enjoying them as much as you can. And then the fourth one is I had to find my wishbone. I had to change my why me into what now? What am I going to do with this? What am I going to, like, what is my what now? What am I doing today? And it doesn't have to be as monumental as writing a book. I said I would never write a book. Don't ever tell God that you never will.
Never say never.
He will have you nevering like you nevered before. I just saw that the other day. I'm like, as I'm finishing up my edits from the last edit. But it's the what now that will drive my resolve to continue to face the darkness. And my what now has turned into, it's been different throughout my different seasons of life. For a while, my what now is I'm going to get up and be a present mom for my kids and for my husband, because that's who and what they deserve, and I deserve that. And now my what now is educating society about the lifelong effects that rape has, and to equip and encourage victims to become survivors, to become victors. And so, like, without even knowing it, you hit on all 4 of my, like, that's my book.
We have a
but you should still read it.
That's why they pay us the big bucks, baby. And by big bucks, I mean $0 at all.
We have a pretty uncanny knack for letting conversation naturally ride, and then having these type of things at the end going, well, I wrote a book and we've actually hit on all 4 of these, and you didn't directly ask me once what each one of these 4 things were. And we're just like, we're good at what we do. So yeah.
Wow, Ben, we're good at what we do.
Hey, we gotta give ourselves a pat on the back every now and then. All right.
Too.
Well, yeah, exactly. Right.
I take over the ego for both of us. It's the cross I bear.
I think, like we've said a few times, these conversations, and I'm not just saying it because we're on a podcast having the conversation. I genuinely mean these conversations are very important, and they are hard, and you don't want to say anything. Again, I say it every single week. I come into the episode, I'm like, okay, you cannot make any jokes. Like, do not, like, I have all these things in my head. I'm like, dude, okay, this is going to be a touchy subject. And then by the end, when you just have conversations with people, you're like, okay, it is, jokes are fine. Now, and granted, if that wasn't the scene, that's not the scene. But at the same time, if you just meet people where they are and just have genuine, honest conversations with them, even about uncomfortable things, everyone can learn and grow, and we can get to a situation to where we recognize that things are horrible and they're bad and that evil does exist in the world, but we can rally around each other and try to make the best of that situation as possible. So,
yeah, so I think I've only got a couple things left, and one of these things is actually Alex's thing, but I like to introduce it, but we'll get there in a second. I just wanted to say, thank you again for taking the time to talk with us tonight and go through this, and yes, these conversations are extremely important. So I just want to say, if there's anything that Alex and I can do to help more than what we are, just by sitting on this podcast and having the conversation and putting your book out there for people, let us know, please, and we'll do whatever we can to help, because the education needs to happen, and it needs to be a lot better than what it has been. But on to Alex's thing. So we asked this question to the majority of our guests every week that we have on. It's been just a thing we started this year, and I have a little mental tally board or ranking board of everybody's answer to this question, just because I think it's interesting. But Alex, I'm gonna go ahead and let you send the question.
thanks a bunch. I was gonna tell you, like, let's not ask a question this week, but
I mean,
think it's important.
I think it's still important. I think it still
important.
fits. I
Yeah.
thought about it for a second. I was like, no, I think it still fits.
I know. One of our first guests at the end was like, do you have any other questions? And me being the big brain person that I am, I was like, yeah, why are we here?
Who's humble now?
Like, what?
dude?
Yeah,
brain.
no, that was extremely that was satirical, saying big brain, because now I've gotten myself into a situation where every week we ask, so why do you think we're here? What do you think the whole goal of humanity is? And people look at me, they're like, oh my God, dude, you saved that for last? Like, Jesus. But at the same time, it's been really cool. And I think you've touched on a lot of it already with your faith and everything, but I'm not going to speak for you. What do you think the goal of humanity should be, in the sense of why are we here? What's our purpose? What should we all be working towards? Kind of leave it at that. Yeah, super loaded, I know. And it can be a sentence, it can be a paragraph, it can be 3 words, 5 words, 150 words, whatever you want. But
why are we here? Because God wanted us here.
Yeah,
it says that, and did you see that coming?
I did kind of.
Yeah.
God said, let us make man in our image, and so why are we here? Because God formed Adam out of dirt and then breathed life into him, and you can argue evolution with me. That's fine. I'm all for micro evolution, not so much macro evolution. But to show glory to God, for us to live our lives in a manner that, in such a posture that people see his work in our lives and end up praising him and glorifying him. It's not, I think can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You're still good.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This one just turned off. Sorry.
We're getting down to the wire.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, maybe that was like I saw that coming from the Christian lady, but
no.
We've had.
I mean, we're supposed to be becoming more like Christ once you accept Him into your lives, and if we've acknowledged that He's our Lord and Savior, then it, the point is to lead people to Him,
Mm-hmm.
to the truth. And the greatest thing we can do is to bring our sanctified self, like ourselves that are becoming more like Jesus, and through the trials that we're walking, let's come alongside other people who are hurting and who are walking this messy, hard road, and love them well,
There it is.
and like love them humbly, and point them to the Lord,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can have that hope as well, and so that they can have eternal life, which is what God desires for us.
Yeah.
What?
I was gonna say real quick. The reason I said there it is right after you said come alongside people and love them and help them is because no matter who we have on here, whatever their walk in life is, whether they're Christian, atheist, whatever, we've had a bunch of different people on. Their answers all have boiled down to basically that same phrase. No matter what, which is why we really like asking the question, because no matter, it's just shown us more and more every time that no matter where you come from, we're not as different as everyone makes us out to be.
Yeah, no, because we're all cut from the same cloth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in every answer, whenever I listen to people, I just wait for that one little that little phrase,
Like,
whether it's a little bit like whether it's a little bit tweaked or not, and I'm like, there it is. I always wait for it.
We had a near-death survivor on, and I asked her that question, and she just very succinctly, very calmly, she said, "We're all just walking each other home." And like I just got goosebumps saying that again. It was like, how beautiful, like
Yeah.
that's so perfect. Like, and that's
Yeah.
essentially what it all kind of boils down to, I think, is we're all just walking each other home. And again, I totally stole that. I did not come up with that. Thank you, Nancy. But
Well,
yeah.
the next time I get asked that, that's what I'll give her credit to. I haven't heard her
We're gonna start
story, but
giving Nancy royalties,
No,
dude.
I think your answer
Yeah.
was perfect, especially that's like Ben just said. It's really cool listening to so many different people from so different walks of life that have done so many different things, all kind of boil it down to the same kind of answer at the end.
Mhm.
That's it's cool. And
Yeah.
again, I'm not just going to keep parroting what Ben just said, but we're all a lot more similar than what maybe some major news organizations would have us believe. So
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yep.
agree.
Well, Amanda, once again, thank you so much for
Thank you for having me. I appreciate
taking
it.
the time. We will not take up any more of your time on this fine Sunday evening. Go ahead and
Sounds good.
do people is there like any social media plugs that you have, or where can people find you?
Yeah, so Facebook.
Oh, we can't
no,
hear
we've
you.
lost her.
Oh no, I think her
I think her other headphone died.
I think her other headphone died. I think your other headphone died.
Are we back?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there we go. We just missed
Yeah, my
all of
daughter
that.
was calling me. I was like,
okay.
sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
So Tears Speak, just spelled out TARSSPEAK.
Okay.
07 is Facebook and Instagram. That's my nonprofit that I'm starting that has no money, but we're getting there.
That's how it happens. That's fine.
But it's all about like what I shared about my what now as far as educating society. TEARS stands for Teaching and Empowering Assault Rape Survivors.
Okay.
And then Speak. So
gotcha. Tears, like tears coming down your face, but obviously you just said what it stands for, and then Speak. 07?
07.
All one.
Perfect.
All one word. All right.
Yeah.
Perfect. We'll make sure to put those
Thank
in
you so much.
the show notes as well, so everybody can find you there.
You'll be getting a request from me, so it's just easier to link everything, and I'll add you on socials this evening, so I won't forget and have to go back and re-listen. So, and then I can follow you.
Okay, sounds good.
Perfect. All right.
you.
Yep. So again, we're not gonna take up any more time. Your daughter's already calling for you, so thank you once again
Yeah.
for coming on here and sharing your story and having the hard talk, so we can do our best to get it out there on our end as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you,
Alright.
Thank you for your
thank you,
willingness.
Amanda.
All right, you
Alright.
gentlemen, have a nice evening.
You too. See you
Alrighty,
later.
you do the same.
Bye.
Bye. Alrighty.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm like, I don't even know what to say. That was
How you doing over there, buddy?
That was really cool, man.
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for that woman.
I
I'll
do
just
too.
put it that way,
I do
because
too.
I don't know how I would react. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
You're saying I don't know how I would react. We've said that quite a few times. We've had the same type of conversation before on the podcast. I hope truly that we never have to figure out how we would react
Yeah,
to that situation.
yeah. I truly hope so too. It stinks that it happened to Amanda, but at the
Mhm.
same time, watching her, or I should say, listening to her talk about how she's made her way through it.
Mhm.
Again, I just have a ton of
It's
respect for that lady.
respect,
So
and it's inspiring,
yes,
and I'm amazed. She's a strong, resilient woman, and she is literally doing the Lord's work.
yeah, quite literally,
Quite
quite
literally.
literally. And it just, again, just goes to show you, you never know. Like, you would never guess, just chatting with her, I'm sure, off the street, what she's been through.
Yeah.
And you just never know where somebody's at and what they've been through. So just meet them where they're at and be as good as you can to them as possible.
Which is important, because you guys need to go out there and be kind to each other and make sure that you tell somebody.
You love them. Text them right now. Get your phone out again. Find that contact. Yeah, that one. Yep, do that one. Just very simple. I love you. Okay, send. Perfect. All right.
All right.
Now do it again. In person. Homework. 3 people this week.
3 people this
Tell
week.
somebody
Homework.
you love them.
Consensually ask for a hug.
Yes. Yes, that's right.
But yep. With that, you guys have a happy and safe 4th of July on Tuesday. And
Correct.
we will see you back here next week with. We can give everybody a little teaser to who's next week, or do we know?
Oh, I can. I'll have to pull up my calendar real quick because I don't know off the top of my head. Next week is Larry Jorgensen.
Larry Jorgensen. Do we get a little teaser about what his topic is, or are we just gonna roll with that?
He is a guy that does things.
We're gonna get there eventually. Bear with us.
To be honest with you, I don't know what his bio is or what his
All right,
story
no worries.
is.
We got another guest this week. We should have guests every week out through hopefully the end of July. So,
we've got every week in July, and I just booked the first weekend in August. So
there you go. Perfect.
We'll keep them coming.
Keep them coming. All right, guys. Like I said, have a safe and happy weekend, and we'll see you back here next week for our interview, chat, whatever, with Larry Jorgensen. So, see y'all. Love y'all. Have a good one.
Adios. Love you guys. No, well, good. Nice. Well, I'm going to go find some dinner, so I will talk to you later, friend.